Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, I need water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope, to the rope! 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear!
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Tailboard on the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we get together and talk about current events that are of interest to firefighters and get some various opinions. So today I'm joined by our guest hosts, Dirk and Denis, and we're going to continue our discussions here. How about that fire in Spain, Valencia, Spain, the apartment building that just ignited in minutes? And I think how many people? 10, 14 people died?
No, injured. Only, don't want to get this wrong. I think it was 6 people died. 14 were missing, so we haven't gotten any updates on what happened there. Or even 3 people died. 3 people died. 6 firefighters were injured. That wasn't even in the news, but I got this from a source.
So I mean, it's
6 firefighters were injured. And then I don't know if anybody's seen this where they had this jump pillow, like
the cushion. The
cushion. That was actually a firefighter jumping off.
Yeah.
It was a firefighter that jumped to safety. So they're trying to get people out and almost got killed there. So interesting. Interesting building too, because it was built in 2007, so it's not that old. And it was a mixed occupancy, so they had like a supermarket at the bottom, probably multiple other businesses there, and then apartments on top in 2 city blocks, basically. But they did use cladding, which is, everybody says flammable cladding, but it's not flammable. It just needs the right amount till it becomes flammable, just like everything else that's non-flammable. And I think in this case, they had a very strong wind coming from the ocean. And just made things worse, right? And the staffing in general in Spain is not what we would think of, like when we think of, let's say, Germany, where they send like 300 firefighters, no problem, for a house fire. Yeah, we'll got this. So it's a little bit less staffing. Valencia is kind of like the size of Barcelona, I think. And their standard equipment it's small fire trucks, right? So, and then they roll up there, and then what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, I mean, this thing was going right now, so obviously life safety is going to be their first thing, is that they're trying to get people out, get the people out. The cladding was 2 layers of aluminum with a polyurethane insulating barrier, solid polyurethane insulating barrier in between, not unlike the cladding that's on many buildings in the UK as well for insulation, such as Grenfell Tower and the other tower that burnt a few years before. So, when given enough heat and the right conditions. Also, the thing I just finished reading actually a little while ago, and it's worth the read. It was a little bit expensive to buy, but was Show Me the Bodies, How We Let Grenfell Tower Happen. And, it's not just the cladding material, but it's the installation procedures. And in the tests, if you put a 90-degree break in the bottom or the top of these panels, they burned completely differently, and they would I think they would fail the test. If the panel was straight up against another panel, it was fine. But if you put a break in the panel to hook it to the other one, they would burn violently just because of that shape. And also how the insulation around the windows are supposed to be filled with rock wool or some inflammable material. And if that wasn't used, then of course you got the result. And so there'll be a lot more coming out on that building. Of course, the company that built it went under a few years after. And so they it's going to be a mess.
So Paul said inflammable, but he meant non-flammable.
Non-flammable,
yeah, which would be like rock wool. And I was going to make a comment that, a lot of siding, for instance, that they put on is certified, right? and it's certified to some NIST or UL test and so forth. But these tests are standardized, right? So they're based on a certain orientation of the material, a certain size of the material, how the fire starts. What so many pallets made of number two spruce. I'm making this up, but whatever the material is, under certain wind conditions or no wind conditions, they're in a test building, they're instrumented. So that's all good. And it's like saying a 1 hour fire door or a 2 hour fire door, fire separation more properly, closure. It's all it is basically it's comparative. It does not mean that it's not necessarily a risk of fire. So when you put a material like Paul says and you change the orientation of it, and I would say also you put it on the side of a high building and you build it in around, balconies. And so you've got walls facing walls. So you've got a heat feedback loop and you've got all these other conditions that are different from the test conditions. You can go from just meets the standard for smoke and self-propagating fire, doesn't, to a situation where it's a problem. And then you get a lot of this going on, particularly if the fire happens at a lower area, and you get a lot of preheating going on. So what happens when this polyurethane foam in the middle is actually not polyurethane foam, it's off-gassing, dripping liquid. Did anybody test liquid or liquefied polyurethane foam dripping onto a fire as to whether that's going to resist fire or not? That's not part of the test. And so, but in the real world, that's what's happening. So that's a problem.
I know I read
And
an
firefighters
article.
need to be aware that the tests and the standards are not everything.
Yeah, apparently I read an article in the NFPA journal a few years ago after Grenfell that there is an NFPA standard which most jurisdictions adopt in North America in their building code, that these type of panels are not acceptable in North America. But the code is completely different in Europe, and they have been able to, with much fanfare and arguing and differences of opinion, use them in many areas. Apparently, even when this building, I was reading an article, was built, soon after it was built, the code changed, and to require more separations between the floors and stuff like that. But of course, this building didn't have that. But yeah, it's just terrible to try to respond to that. And London Fire Brigade was severely chastised for their response to Grenfell and to sticking to their traditional stay in your apartment, we'll come get you, depending on separations, shelter in place. And they never even, but the IC was inside the building. They didn't even know what was going on outside until people pointed it out to them what was going on. And so the response is just so overwhelming. What do you do, right?
So talking to my friend in Spain, he says this protect in place is still, it's a standard procedure because it does make sense for most fires, right? Especially interior fires, but outside that's a different story. Also, I asked the question is, was that building sprinklered? Because we've seen similar fires of flammable cladding in Shanghai, like basically in China, but then there's like zero injured, everybody got out. So it's kind of like, man, they were probably sprinkled. So their fire makes it in, but then it gets knocked down. So then just the cladding burns down, and yeah, it looks exciting, but at least nobody gets injured or hurt. In this case, we don't know, and I'm not sure about the time of day it came in.
It was
supper time, eh?
Supper time, yeah, supper time, 5 o'clock, yeah.
Probably a lot of people are still home. Although the Spaniards, they said
go out actually
it
saved them because a lot of people weren't home yet. It said
it
was like just before 5 or something.
Yeah,
so they said a lot of people were not in the building at the time of the fire.
It's right after siesta.
You're at the taverna.
Yeah.
The taverna, yeah.
No, it's the siesta. The taverna comes first. You have your beer, and then you lay down for an hour or two.
Okay,
right?
I thought you did that at the same place.
It's a really cool. It's a really cool thing. Some information I got though is the response to that. Staffing is usually 4 to 5 on the rig. So I got this from Barcelona. So Barcelona, if they would get a call like this, probably multiple calls, right? So they would send a 2 alarm right from the get-go. So there would be 4 engines, 2 ladders, 1 rescue, 1 ventilation truck, 2 ambulances, 2 fire chiefs, and then an advanced command truck. and then so once they would get there, they would probably just double that, but that would probably outstrip all the resources they have in the city.
The
So
close ones for sure, would be
yeah,
done. I saw the one video they showed them doing an aerial rescue, and they had two aerials side by side, one flowing water to kind of protect the area, and one getting the people. Although we didn't see a lot of aerials around the building in the videos, but you had mentioned, Dirk, of course, the one problem potentially falling debris,
yeah,
and they were focused on getting people out of apartments from the inside, which is
yeah.
probably why we didn't see it. It was interesting to see the firefighter jump on the. Why don't we have those rescue balloons here? Those are a great idea. I know the theater or the movie industry uses it all the time, but the firefighter jumped off. There was an aerial sitting right there parked, but they didn't
Yeah.
get him in the aerial. Instead, they had him jump off. It's that was
Yeah,
interesting,
but
but I guess
have a look at how he landed. He did not
on
land
the
in the middle.
edge.
It
No,
He
it
was
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 lucky.
close.
Yeah, he was lucky. But when your ass is on fire, you don't aim that well. I'm pretty sure.
but
Kudos to
but
the
I had
guys setting it up because they are still in the fallen debris in the collapse zone, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
So
but I had somebody asked me, says, why don't they use these more often? I said, well, you got a guy who jumped onto this one. He's likely been trained how to do this. I says, how do you get somebody who's a civilian and, like you said, your ass is on fire, and all you're concerned about is jump will save you, and you may jump, but as you're falling, you're still traveling, and you miss the balloon.
you
You
don't travel
better.
that much though. You go out and then you go down. That's just physics. There's no you don't because you're not running with I don't know 10, 20, 30 kilometers an hour. So when you're hanging, it's almost a straight drop. And the nice thing about these things is they're inflated in less than 30 seconds. One firefighter can put them in a position. We
So
chased the
why?
jumper.
So why don't we have them here?
Because it's very rare.
What?
That's the whole thing. Like
Yeah, but
I
we're supposed to be risk management. It's like, why don't we have tall aerials? Same thing.
sure,
It's
yeah,
very rare.
But
yeah.
I'm sorry, the place on the truck where that goes is there's a coffee maker there, so
Oh, that's
There
why,
you go. That's it.
But it's the same with escape
we're gonna get involved
hoods.
in that one.
Why don't
Yeah.
we have escape hoods? Why don't we have those cushions like that?
Interesting little fact is like those uh, jump pillows, whatever, rescue pillows, whatever you want to call them. They're right next to shop vac that are also in most fire engines in Europe to remove water out of apartments.
In this in the
Refreshing.
80s, in the 80s, Saskatoon carried, it was made by Survivair, the SCBA people who now are like, I don't know who they are now, a different company, but, and they made a vacuum that you wore on your back, a shop vac, wet dry vac, you wore on your back like a backpack, and you'd go around the apartment sucking up all the water. And that was what they did. But
Yeah.
I know now that most fire departments don't do that.
No, it's not our job, but sometimes it's very convenient to you stop the flow and then get the water out that you can, and then the company is going to come in and does it. In Europe, there's still more focus on preventing the water damage in lower levels,
Right.
like the floors below, right? So the more water we can suck up, the better it is, and just a regular sump pump, you still get 2-3 inches of water left standing, right? So those vacuum cleaners were very, very handy, and they actually had the built-in pump. So as soon as the vacuum was filled up, it stopped, and then you just threw it was a 42 mil connection or inch-and-a-half connection. You threw it in the bathtub, out the window, and then it just pumped it out, and then you kept going, right? So
I prefer the old method where you rip the toilet out and squeegee all the water to the
Squeegee
hole.
it down the drain.
yes,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
toilet was perfectly fine
Yeah.
before the fire department came,
No,
right?
no, no.
I mean,
It's
it's $150. If yeah, I get that, but that's we still did this. Like we
So,
had some pumps, and we throw them in there, sucked up most of the water, but there's still a lot left. So, anyhow, that's some of the things, the differences between North America and Europe. I think the service to the people, there's a higher value to it. Same with the escape pods, as you said. Like we're just like, oh, stay in there, protect in place. But these guys go in and hook up these escape pods and bring everybody out, right? So
so
very different
speaking of
approach.
Speaking of current events and stuff we don't have everywhere, like the cushion in Spain, how about the fire in New York last week?
Another fatality.
Apartment fire, multiple injuries, a fatality,
3
and
rooftop rescues. Yeah.
FDNY did the rooftop rescue. Okay, guys, that rooftop rescue is not rocket science. I mean, it's fairly simple as far as how to do it. You can't really screw it up very much. Why don't more fire departments do that? I mean,
Oh,
the guy's got a
one
belt
for you.
on.
Yeah.
He hooks to the belt. He hooks to a couple of guys on the roof, and they lower him down, do a pickoff, and lower him to the ground. That is very common in New York City, and they do 1 or 2 a year. Here they did 3 at one fire, which is awesome. Why isn't that more common, my TR friend and my fire chief friend?
I can tell you because there's no belay, there's no backup safety. It's not an approved anchor. There's so many things that people would argue that this is not a safe operation. Again, they train on it. They pick equipment that is safe already, and then they're just really good at it.
How do they anchor the guy? Is it couple firefighters?
1 or 2 firefighters, depending. But they're usually going over the parapet, right?
So there's resistance.
There's resistance there. They have an Edge Pro. The rope, I think it's an 18 mil rope. It's almost like our utility ropes on most fire trucks, right? It's a very thick rope. They are using a sitting harness, a class 2 harness.
Mm-hmm,
so
yep.
Again, most safety conscious fire chiefs.
But a class 2 harness is okay for self-rescue, but I guess this isn't really self-rescue because you're rescuing somebody.
And how do you secure the patient to the firefighter? They're just clinging to them. Exactly. So there's the other thing. It's like, oh, how do we secure the patient? It's dangerous.
They're going to die. Right? But they're going to die if they don't get rescued.
Yeah, but it looks bad when the firefighter drops that victim while he's clinging to him.
It's a high risk operation.
It's a high risk, low frequency. But they train on it.
It's a lot higher risk if you don't know how to do it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But we even have technical rescue teams that would never do that, right? And then you look at other parts of the world, let's say Spain, China, where you see these teams actually jumping to prevent a suicide. So they're coming from the floor above and basically karate kick people back onto the balcony, into their apartment. It was like, that's freaking crazy, but they train on it. They know what they're doing. And the risk is that the person gets hurt falling back into their apartment. And then there's usually plenty of people just jumping on them. So it's kind of like it's been done in a lot of different parts of the world. And mostly what we do in North America is we ridicule them because, it's not 2 rope systems. It's got to be a 10-to-1 safety factor. It's like, well, it's about speed and efficiency and training. And FDNY does this like no other department. I think they
Do any other departments in North America do that roof rescue thing?
I've never heard or seen it.
If any of our listeners know, let us know. I'm curious because it seems like a pretty well thought out practice procedure that works for that dire emergency where they can't get out.
Yeah. I don't see the equipment as big as a problem as some people make it. I look at the anchor points when there are none, and you're just using the 2 fat firefighters, and you send the skinny rookie down, right?
So I'd be on the roof, right?
You'd be on the roof.
Strong enough to hold them.
Yeah. No, you just lay down. So you hook a person up to your harness.
Yeah.
You are the anchor point. You become the anchor point. Plus, you get the friction of 2. Well, it's overall it's almost a 90-degree bend.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of friction there. It works. Right. And going back to Spain, I know the Spaniards, they access a lot of balconies coming from the floor above, and they use a wire ladder, just a rolled up ladder.
Not a Pompier ladder.
It's rolled up. It's wired. It just has the rungs, and you roll it up. And what they do is they just throw it over the rail, floor above. A guy steps on it, and the second guy's belay does it exactly like the FDNY does for the belay. So the main is that ladder where just the guy stands on, and the other guy is belaying by laying on the floor.
But I've got a ladder like that under my bed, for the second floor window or whatever. I mean, it's still sitting there. But,
Walmart special.
Walmart special, yeah.
But
And
so
apparently the fire started with a lithium ion battery. Is that what I heard yesterday?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, another one.
Again,
Well, this
yeah.
is their, I forget which number fatality is for New York, but this is another lithium ion fire fatality. And I can remember back to when my mom used to have a mobility scooter and she keep it in her apartment. And,
In the hallway,
it was in the hallway near the front door, right?
of
But
course.
it wasn't lithium ion, it was a conventional lead acid
Right.
battery. So relatively safe. I mean, usually it's a charger that's the problem, not the battery, in those situations. But it's we're certainly hearing a lot about these lithium ion fires and the enormous number of fatalities, relatively speaking, that are coming from them, right? And it's New York is thinking about serious legislation on these, and they need to.
There is a good article on LinkedIn this week. I think I shared it with you guys about, and I commented on it. It's Tesla is now approved like Powerwall version 3 or something, and they're being installed in homes and garages and places because they want to save the power from their solar panels. And these things are lying in wait in a house, just waiting to be damaged in a fire or a flood. And we show up, and now we've got this thousands of watts of energy and kilowatts of power sitting there. What are we doing with it? We don't even know it's there. There have been quite a few fires in Australia. They typically put it in the attic, and then all of a sudden there's a house fire, and then it goes crazy. So this is a problem, not alone. And we were going to talk about EV fires, but we're going to have to quit here because I think we're going to run out of time for some of our people. But that's
And,
the
and it's
battery
all well.
energy storage is going crazy.
It's all well and good when they're new, but what is it? What serviceability and safety is there 10 years down the road?
Yeah.
When they start to break down.
We all gonna die soon, anyways, according to the
Okay, Doug.
experts. So it doesn't really matter. Am I spending too much
positive.
time with Dougie?
Yeah. And don't do your rooftop camp out in your PFAS impregnated turnout gear and sleep in it for a week.
No, it's clean. We
Okay.
wash
No,
it.
it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
clean.
No,
It's
it is
full of
clean. Yeah.
PFAS.
Yeah, so is your drinking bottle, so is your
Oh,
frying pan, so is everything. So it's really like, and one of those, and that's totally off topic again. The
here we go.
PFAS is 10,000 chemicals. Which one of them gives you cancer and which one doesn't? Or do we
They
just
don't know.
assume all of them
But,
do?
but
And
what
we'll
they
never
do
know.
know, Dirk, is that young firefighters with minimal exposure to fires are contracting cancer at an alarming rate, and they're linking that to the PFAS gear.
Is it young firefighters or is it young people? Because they're exposed to this even outside the fire department.
Young firefighters. Notre Dame's done a study. Someone else just did a study.
So why do the young people die when I've been wearing this stuff for 25 years? I should be long dead, right?
Can't get
So
through your skin.
that is the question. Maybe the young guys are too weak nowadays. Maybe
Your
they just
skin
can't
is too
take it.
thick. That's the thing.
Oh dear,
Exactly.
we better go have a coffee. I think the coffee's ready in the kitchen.
We are not scientists, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, the PFAS is a problem, but it's also like same discussion with PPE. How thick do we have to make it for that one fire in your lifetime where you don't have a hose line, and then it gets really, really hot? And like, why do we run around in iron armor when we just really don't need it all the time?
It's not
right?
the turnout gear that's going to protect you from the heat. It's the SCBA.
Yeah. Well, or the mass failing, whatever, right? But yeah, again, that's the risk benefits analysis that we have to make.
It's called a hose line.
In that case, yes. But when we're talking about cancer,
yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't tell people this job is for everybody and it's easy and we'll find a niche for you. Maybe we should tell them, no, this job will give you cancer, and see how many people apply.
It's risky. Yep.
Yeah, that's why it's fun, right? It's fun. That's what.
Which is why we're having trouble getting people.
Identify the risks, deal with them. That's
minimize the risk if you can. Yep. Minimize the risk.
It's the same.
All right, everybody.
You're cutting us off. That's rude.
You got to go to work.
I got to go to work. Yes.
Yeah. Denis and I do not have to go to work.
Oh,
Just
then
saying.
just keep talking. I'll just shut up.
Tomorrow.
Go.
Tomorrow we'll go over it.
Okay,
Thanks for a
guys.
good discussion, guys, and we'll do another tailboard soon. It's fun to talk about the current events. Actually, it's kind of interesting.
Those rabbit holes are horrible. Hey, we cannot stay on topic. That's just.
I want to talk about EV fire trucks. We need to talk about that because there's all kinds of advertising banners, announcements. The first electric fire truck in Canada, the first electric fire truck in North America. They can't all be first, and there is what. How do you define what a electric fire truck is exactly? Oh yeah, it includes a 400 horse cat motor. Okay, so it's a
Yeah,
hybrid. No, it's not a hybrid because the electricity runs everything. Okay, so it's diesel electric like a locomotive. That would be more accurate.
there you go. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Except it's got lithium-ion batteries in it, and is it safe to have in your fire hall? That's a question.
Charging.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
And
it'd be interesting to see the experience with that.
it's what Berlin's got a couple 3 now, I think, Dirk, you said.
Yeah, they've been testing it for over 2 years, almost 3 years now.
Yeah.
Amsterdam. So there's a few of them in Europe, and
There's a few.
more departments are ordering them. I know
I
North America,
notice
like LA was one of the first ones,
I
and
notice
now
the big car manufacturers are backing away from EVs fast because they can't sell them. I guess the lots are filling up with EVs. You can't give them away because people don't want them for regular use. 100% EV. Nothing wrong with a hybrid. That makes total sense, especially in a commuting environment.
But here's one to consider. I mean, one of the issues that it was a guy on the news the other day, and I won't mention the brand, but one of the problems was his EV, died just a couple years after he bought it. And it's been sitting at the dealership for a year
Yep.
waiting for a battery pack. And one of the
Yep.
fundamental issues with that is that when these auto manufacturers are making these, they don't actually make the battery pack. So they're not in the supply chain as a parts replacement. They buy, I don't know, 10,000 battery packs from some company, most likely in Asia. And once they're used up, they're gone, right? Like you can't get a replacement. Nobody's making a replacement. The technology is now at stage 3 or stage 4 or whatever. So nobody's making a stage 1 battery pack. So if you own a Nissan Leaf or one of these early entrant ones and the battery pack goes, you're virtually screwed. And so there's actually companies out there now that are putting IC, internal combustion engines in these cars because the car is fine, but you can't get a battery for it.
It's
So they
funny.
rip
We've
all
got
that stuff out. So think about a fire truck that's supposed to be in service for 20 to 30 years, and it's an EV fire truck. Not really, but basically there's a big battery in there. Where are you buying that battery 15 years from now when you're doing its midlife overhaul? Where's that coming from?
yeah.
Well, our
And how much
lifespan
that's
is
going to
12 to
cost?
15 years. So, and I think a
Your
battery could last that long, right?
your
So,
fire trucks.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Actually, it doesn't. The battery is based on the number of cycles. So if your truck is cycling and recharging because it's going to a lot of calls, you're going to get a lot shorter battery life than you would get if it sat in the hall on a trickle and you hardly ran it. So if you got a department that's running 150 calls a year, had a bag load of money and spent $2.5 million on an EV fire truck, you might get your 20 years out of that battery. But if you're in a bigger city and you're running 2,000, 3,000 calls a year,
you only get to 12 years.
like we used to, you're probably lucky to get 10 years out of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll
Well,
find out. Right?
we are lucky right now getting 10 years out of a fire truck. And then the supply chain problems. They are
Again, it's
regular trucks,
problems.
right? It's just
Yeah.
problems,
I
problems,
mean, you
problems.
can't get
Engine control unit,
parts.
tranny control unit, TCUs, ECUs.
You try to get any vehicle now, like you look at the fire trucks that are 10 or 15 years old. You can't get parts for the electronics because the standards for those electronics, the transmissions, the engines, etc., have all changed, and they don't make components. Try to get a electronic governor control for your fire truck that's 10 years old. Try to get the mother circuit board that controls all the lights and stuff like that. You can't find them, right? So yeah.
But that's relatively easier to fix than your engine control module.
Yeah, or your battery.
Or your $100,000 battery pack or $200,000 battery pack on your EV fire truck. So I don't know. I think the
Doesn't
jury's
make
still out.
sense to me. But I guess we're old, so we don't adopt new technology, I guess.
What
No,
what I
that's not.
really
I'm offended by that comment. On two levels. Number one, I'm not old. Well,
you are the oldest
Mature.
here right now.
You're mature.
hey, Turk, where's your cat? And the other thing I'm offended by is I do adopt new technology,
I know.
but you gotta jump into the pool of sharks with thinking in mind. Like which shark am I?
And there is no thinking right now. It's just, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Let's do it. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, and there was an article. Yeah, did you see the marketplace where they tried to drive from I think it was Pickering to Ottawa, and they couldn't get there because they couldn't get the vehicle charged on the way. And they had like a 600 or 700 kilometer range on, I think 500 kilometer range to make a 300 kilometer trip, but they made the mistake of trying to drive it in the winter when
Oh
half
yeah,
the
the range
battery's
was
going, half the energy goes to keep the battery warm, let alone you. And I remember listening to one electric vehicle operator, and they recommended this. Well, the best way to get range out of your vehicle is to turn your seat heater on because that's more efficient than actually
and leave
defrosting
the
your
heat
windshield.
up.
And I'm thinking to myself,
Yeah.
hello,
Yeah.
what am I missing here?
I'm just gonna burn some fossil fuels, some old
Well,
dinosaur bones.
and I shared the article with you about the hydrogen and the cost
Yeah,
of
the
hydrogen by
range
kilo.
and the range
So,
is really poor.
yeah, so
Yeah,
a fuel full of hydrogen is $200, and you
right.
get 400, 300, 400. Yeah, so that's
But in
something
that,
to consider, right?
but in that vein, there was a recent event about a truck that had compressed natural gas on board,
There
which
you
is,
go.
for all intents and purposes, similar to hydrogen, right? It's a lighter than air gas, and those fuels are either one of two components, right? They're either compressed natural gas, which is, or hydrogen's a refrigerated gas. But anyway, so it's either compressed natural gas, which means that it's actually in gaseous form, compressed into a high pressure cylinder, or it's LNG, liquefied natural gas, which means it's cryogenic, right? And so that particular truck would be CNG. I don't know if there's
It
much
was.
LNG.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much LNG stuff driving around because it's really problematic, right? You lose it because it's evaporating all the time and warming up. But we probably need to talk about that at some point, about CNG vehicles, and really all these trucks driving around Alberta with big propane tanks in the back. Not a lot of difference between a compressed natural gas powered truck and a propane powered truck. Very similar.
It's not too many around anymore, is there, Paul? It used to
Particularly
be it used
common.
to be quite common
Oh, you mean
having
like
those.
passenger vehicles,
Yeah,
or you
passenger
mean
or pickup trucks,
propane
utility.
delivery
Yep,
trucks?
yep.
Half tons with the tank in the bed.
Don't see many
Just
propane ones
No,
anymore.
no.
Yeah,
when
not
I lived there in
common.
the '80s, they were everywhere.
They were. It was cheaper, but there's a lot of issues with less power. A friend of mine actually drives bus for a city here in Alberta, and he says we have three types of buses. We have diesel buses, natural gas buses, and electric buses. The electric buses don't work. The natural gas buses we put them only on the slow routes because they can't accelerate at all. And then they have the diesel buses for everywhere else. It's like, because the CNG doesn't have the same energy in it. But the problem is now I'm wondering, I don't even know the compressed natural gas reservoir on the truck. Is it carbon fiber wrapped aluminum cylinder? Is that what it
I don't
is?
think it's any. Well, there has to be a liner in it, but
Yeah.
yes, probably very similar to SCBA bottle technology.
Yeah, because it was like that truck. I don't have the detail yet as to what happened to it in California. There, it was in a vehicle accident initially, or it just had some sort of breakdown. I heard the driver called in and said, my truck's on fire, or there's a problem, and they showed up, and the firefighters were like right beside it, and
Yeah.
boom.
Fundamentally, it was probably a maintenance issue.
Yeah,
but
probably.
but the firefighters, unaware, what were they thinking? The radiator steam, when
Yeah,
really it was natural gas vapors.
right. Of
And
course, there's a little placard maybe on there that says CNG, but it's only about 4 inches square.
yeah,
Yeah, it looked like you knocked the fire down. That's how it looked like. It was just, it's just steam. Like very
yeah,
deceiving. So
And then boom.
bad mistake.
We need to be aware of all these crazy things. There's free online training, new, I think, from ULFSRI or somebody on electric vehicles. I know there's a bunch of training,
Yeah,
that you can
they
look at.
revamped their whole website. I went on there yesterday. There's a ton of more
I heard that.
research. Some very short, like buildings on fire, building construction, building types, and then
Yeah.
how they react to fire. It's a 12-minute kind of quick lesson, which is awesome. Yeah, they got a whole bunch of stuff new on there, so it's worth visiting.
Okay. Well, guys, great chatting here. I think the coffee's ready in the kitchen now. So thanks for joining us on the Tailboard, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Bye bye.